On.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would rather have not risen after such an eloquent presentation by my learned colleague. But Mr. Speaker, my remarks this evening is of a different nature. You know, when we do our budget presentations and we have a lot of information and we cannot always highlight the information, all the information that one may deem important. But Mr. Speaker, what I'm going to talk about tonight is that while there's justifiably been a significant emphasis and attention placed on violence and antisocial behavior, I would like to address something that's really concerning to me and concerning to our country. And that, Mr. Speaker, is our behavior on the roads. The stats, Mr. Speaker, if you will allow me, are very alarming, and they're particularly worrying for a community of our size. This data confirms that enforcement alone, and I must emphasize that, Mr. Speaker, that enforcement alone will not change what is happening on our streets. So I want to consider some sobering numbers in relation to the size of our driving population. So as I had asked, Mr. Speaker, just want a little leeway in reading a couple of statistics. Since 2015, Mr. Speaker, there have been over 49,000 tickets issued for driving offenses. Yeah, 49,000 in our country in the last 8 years. In that same 8-year period, over 14,000 cautions were also issued for driving offenses. So that's 63,900 times someone has gotten caught. Sadly, we still see on a daily basis the offenses on our road and the risk. But let me break that down, Mr. Speaker, but I done a little bit of math. For 63,900 people, over the last 8 years, that equates to 650 offenses a month. 21 a day, which equates to almost one every hour. In the same 8-year period, Mr. Speaker, and members of the public, there were 1,900 arrests for impaired driving. There were some 89 fatalities on our road during this period. So over the last 18 years, Mr. Speaker, if we do a little more calculations, over the last 8 years, those 89 fatalities equates to almost one a month. There were 769 road traffic accidents, Mr. Speaker, that resulted in life-changing injuries. That equates to 8 a month over the 8-year period. Mr. Speaker, what's ironic? As I was on my way this afternoon to come back to the House of Assembly, a mother stopped me on my walk here, and she walked with me. And she said she remembered that my son had passed 10 years ago, and she said that in the same year, her son had gotten a serious accident, had injuries. And she said that her son has not been the same, and he looks good on the outside. But it's an example of the life-changing injuries that we see in this country almost on a daily basis. There have been 4,500 road traffic accidents that has resulted in less serious injuries. That equates over the last 8 years to 47 a month. 5,000 road traffic accidents that resulted in vehicle damage. Over the last eight years, that results, my math says, is almost 2 a day. The numbers, and we have to keep in mind, Mr. Speaker, that the numbers will be much worse. But during this 8-year period, we had 3 years of COVID. We had 3 years of COVID, Mr. Speaker, and we still have alarming numbers of fatalities and road accidents that were life-changing. Mr. Speaker, under my tenure, and actually before my tenure, there was a Operation Vega that targeted road traffic offenses, and I always commend the officers for their work. But, Mr. Speaker, like I said earlier, it's more than just the police doing the job. We all have a part to play. And we have to remember that one momentary lack of attention can result in a life-changing injury or death. But while I'm on my feet, I also want to address drink driving. The number of persons that have been arrested confirms that the repeated message somehow, Mr. Speaker, is not getting through. Drinking and driving puts not only your life at risk, but the lives of other road users. This is completely and utterly unacceptable. So, Mr. Speaker, I implore everyone to take responsibility for their own actions and don't put others at risk. We have to take these numbers to heart. But these are numbers that I have just recited, but the people. These are people, these are our family members, Mr. Speaker. As I look around, I know that almost everyone in this chamber has a family member that has been affected somehow, some way from the road. Some have lost, some have family that they have lost, some have family that have been altered for the rest of their life. So I implore parents and guardians to talk to their teens about the dangers of driving. And we have to take responsibility as a community. So if you suspect a drunk driver, report him, call the police, provide your location and direction. You may be saving not only that person, but that person can be saved from hurting an innocent person, either riding, walking, driving. So there is no excuse for drinking and driving, and there are so many ways to join that out without putting yourself and others at risk. So again, Mr. Speaker, I have some points I'd like to just recite to you. And identify a designated driver for your group. Don't ever let friends drive after drinking. Mm-hmm. If you've been drinking, get a ride home from a friend who has not been drinking, or have someone call you a taxi. If you host a party with alcohol, or alcohol-free beverages, and remind guests to designate a sober driver. Just, Mr. Speaker, don't let friends drive drunk. We at the Ministry of National Security, we work tirelessly every day to ensure that our country remains safe in the community. We brainstorm and we discuss these urgent matters with intention. And no, Mr. Speaker, this ministry that I've now been tasked with being the minister of, we don't have all the answers. So everyone that hears me today in this chamber and on the radio, I would appreciate any kind of input that one may give to help. There are a few short-term preventions that I would like to propose as some food for thought as we attempt to address this very critical issue. And again, Mr. Speaker, I ask your indulgence. Perhaps we should look at, for a time designated, having all lines marked with yellow on our roads. We know that white lines give motorists the unsaid license to overtake. So perhaps let's think about making all lines yellow. Again, only for a time. It could be a possible deterrent, who knows? But maybe it could be worth a try. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, we need to look at, again for a time designated, having all motorcycle speeds reduced to 50 cc. All motorcycles. This would reduce the inclination for someone to speed with deliberate intention, possible deterrent. Who knows, but maybe it's worth a try. What we are doing has not been working. I said earlier that in the last 8 years, we are averaging 1 road fatality a month. And we're averaging 2 life-changing accidents a month. These are statistics that are alarming. The Bermuda numbers, these are our brothers, our sisters, our sons, our daughters And perhaps, Mr. Speaker, we can empower the clubs and organizations or house party hosts to call law enforcement when someone has had too much to drink and has become uncooperative and wanting to drink and drive. So, Mr. Speaker, what I've said are just some possible suggestions as we grapple with this very serious issue. Someone once said, Mr. Speaker, when I was sitting and contemplating, I came across a quote, and the quote goes thus: "Problems left unattended tend to become a crisis." We are losing our men and our women, young and old, to the roads. So we are certainly at a crisis mass, Mr. Speaker. From where I stand, this is a national crisis, Mr. Speaker. You talk about it, but we don't give it much thought after we read in the newspaper that there's another person, another family, another person lost their life, another family that is mourning. So we cannot minimize the impact of this crisis on our families. We cannot minimize the impact of what I'm talking about right now. And like most know in this chamber, I know firsthand. I know firsthand, Mr. Speaker. I lost a 24-year-old son to our roads 10 years ago. And ironically, it was Christmas Day, Mr. Speaker. And not a day goes by that I am not impacted by this tragedy. But not just me as his father. He now has a daughter that's 14 years old, has lost all memory of her father. So, you know, you leave behind siblings, extended family, job family, friends. The pain is insurmountable and the lasting thoughts never end. I am a member of many organizations and clubs, Mr. Speaker, but this is a fraternity that no one ever wants to become a part of, having to deal with the reality that they have lost someone to our words. I don't have the answers. The answers are not going to be easy. Some of the answers may be far out, Mr. Speaker, but we as a community have to recognize that what is the carnage that is happening on our roads is a national crisis. And I thought, Mr. Speaker, that I had to rise to my feet because when I had the opportunity of the budget, we were moving too fast to really emphasize it and focus on it. So thank you for your time, Mr. Speaker.